Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Kosterich. He's an author, a doctor, and a health industry consultant based out of Perth. He has a column in Medical Republic, is assistant clinical editor at Medical Forum, and is regular on Channel 9 and radio. He contributes to many publications and has previously held senior positions in the Australian Medical Association and been on numerous industry and government advisory boards. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Joe.
Good, thanks very much. Groucho Marx, quote attributed to him, "Politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly and applying the wrong remedy." Public health, which originally was about trying to contain the spread of infectious diseases like, plague, TB, this sort of stuff we don't see a lot of these days, it's probably the art of looking for epidemics everywhere, finding them, diagnosing the cause incorrectly, and seeking to apply the wrong remedy, all the while screaming for more government funding. You can laugh at that, it's okay. It's actually true. So following with Genesma's talk, I'm going to have a crack at some of these public health people because they're not nearly as smart as they like to pretend they are. And interestingly, a lot of them aren't doctors. Now, you don't have to be a doctor to get these studies, and Genesma is completely correct. You can fossick this out for yourself, and you can find a study that says black, and probably the next day you can find a study that says white. You can find studies that just say absolutely anything. But the point is that we do not have an epidemic of obesity. Yes, people are heavier than they were 30 years ago, and I just want you to hold that thought for a moment because I'm going to come back to why that's the case. But we do not have an epidemic. You hear the term BMI or body mass index thrown around quite a bit. Who's heard the term body mass index? Yeah. It's a statistical tool at a population level. For an individual, it means nothing. We're told that if you have a BMI, and the BMI is your weight in kilograms divided by the square of your height in metres, and you get a number. We're told that if you have a BMI above 25 that you're overweight, and that's a problem. And this is where this figure of 2/3 of the population come from. 3/4 of those 2/3, do the maths quickly, are in the 25 to 30 category. So they are technically, according to the BMI, which was lowered. One of the best ways in medicine we can create epidemics, in inverted commas, is to lower thresholds. We've got more diabetics now than we used to have because we've lowered the threshold at which we diagnose it. We have more people on statin medications for cholesterol because we've lowered the threshold at which can be diagnosed at. So when they lowered what is regarded as a normal, in inverted commas, BMI, of course you create a lot of overweight people. I could make it even more tomorrow by changing it. Who follows AFL? Any footy followers in the room? Okay, keep your hand up if you're an Eagles supporter. Ah, yes, we even won yesterday. Mind you, it was at home. If you go to the Eagles, you go to any AFL club, any NRL club, any ARU club, any soccer club, and do a BMIs on all the players, they're all going to be technically overweight. Do we think they're unhealthy? No, of course not. It's a relatively meaningless term, and there's enough work out there that tells us that a BMI of up to 30, so all the people in the overweight range, look, maybe if you lost a few kilos, you might look a bit better at the beach. I'm not going to say you might not. Maybe it doesn't matter to you, but you're not going to live any longer or be any healthier. Once you get beyond 30, we've got a slightly different situation. And I think it's fair to say, if I was to say to you in this room, who would feel that if they put on 25 kilos in the next 12 months, they'd feel a lot better? I don't think we'd get too many takers. So I think we all know that. Now, I touched on before about the wrong remedy, and the sugar tax is the wrong remedy. In the early 1980s, can any of you remember what was a significant change in recommendations about what to eat? Any takers? Low fat. Interesting. Now, in the next, hopefully, 90 seconds, I'm going to give you a very, very quick crash course in physiology. There's a gland in the abdomen called the pancreas that, amongst other things, produces insulin. And insulin, if you're a type 1 diabetic, you can't produce it and you need insulin, you've got, problems. Type 2 diabetics don't have a problem that they don't have enough insulin. Every time you eat a meal which has got carbohydrates in it, so we're not just talking sugars, and this is why a sugar tax is not the problem. In fact, tax is not the solution, but a sugar tax is not the solution because it's all forms of refined carbohydrates, including foods that are low fat in particular and get ticks and stars and elephant stamps from the government and the heart foundations, all these other groups. Every time you do that, the body produces insulin to get the glucose out of your bloodstream. Now, insulin does a number of things. It's working very hard to get the body to take up that sugar and convert it into fat. Insulin promotes fat storage and inhibits fat burning. So when you're on a high carb, low fat type diet, guess what the body's doing? It's doing everything it can to stop you burning fat. Do you think that might be frustrating if you're trying to lose weight and do what all these public health experts tell you to do? Would that be frustrating? Of course it's frustrating. Tim Andrews, who's just walked in, and I did check with him last, he's not my patient, so I'm not breaching any confidences. Those of you who've been to the conferences over the years will note that he's lost a few kilos from a few years ago. He did that by abandoning this low fat mantra that's been pushed by the government and all its fellow travellers, and adopting a higher fat diet. Some of you in the room probably remember a time called the 1970s, when people used to eat meat and 3 veg. And then we were told, that's terrible. Oh, you can't do that. That's really bad for you. Well, guess what? It's not bad for you. When people are on a higher fat and protein and a lower carb diet, you don't have to be a purist about this. You don't have to completely cut out these foods. But if you're on that sort of a diet, it works in better with your body because you're not producing all this insulin. You don't end up going into fat storage as against fat burning mode. And guess what? If you don't constantly keep producing insulin at a rate that the body doesn't really want to do it, the cells in your body don't become resistant to insulin. And insulin resistance is the first stage of type 2 diabetes. And look, to be fair, there is potential for it to be, I will not use the word cured, it can certainly be reversed. Interestingly, a doctor in Tasmania, Dr. Gary Fetke, he's an orthopaedic surgeon, has been told by APRA, the Australian Health Practitioners Regulatory Authority, that he is not allowed to give nutritional advice to his patients. And the reason for that is he told them to cut down on sugars in the diet. So anybody wants to Google the Fetke case, that's worth looking into. So essentially, the problem we do have today, and I'm not disputing that we don't have a problem, and I'm certainly not disputing that being significantly overweight creates health issues, has been largely brought about by public health advice. And you'll see these people scream, oh no, people don't follow advice, they don't follow advice. People actually have. And if you look at sales of eggs, if you look at sales of full fat products, if you look at sales of saturated fats, they have been in decline, and sales of low fat foods have been in the ascendancy. That's starting to change a little bit. And in fact, literally just in the last week, Coca-Cola Amatil came out and announced a profit downgrade because people are actually wanting to consume less sugar. Who drinks coffee or tea? Okay. Anybody put 11 sugars into their coffee or tea? Hands up. 11 sugars? Okay. How many teaspoons of sugar do you think there might be in a can of Coke? It's not a trick question. 11. There you go. Fine, it's not a problem. Have it if you like to, but you wouldn't probably put 11 teaspoons of sugar into your cup of coffee. So there's a lot of hidden sweetness, and a lot of foods that are not sweet have a high sugar content. So again, this is where a sugar tax is not the answer. But the human body does, well, before we go to that, I'll use another analogy, because I think analogies can be helpful. Who drives a car? Okay, when you go to the Bowser, there's generally a choice of a few different fuels, right? There's 91, 95, 98 diesel. If you drive a car that probably goes best on 98, who's going to go up to the Bowser and say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put diesel in this car? Is anybody going to do that? No. And if you did, you might expect that your car's not going to run terribly well. You know, it might not break down the next day, but it's not going to go terribly well. And when it does break down, it's probably going to be fairly expensive to repair it. As humans, when we go around the supermarket, we do, and this is because we've been told to do it, tend to do the equivalent of putting diesel into a Ferrari. We're putting foods into our systems that aren't really best suited to our systems. Now, the thing about the human body compared to the car is it's much more forgiving. You can go for years and years and years before it may start to break down. But one day it will, and at that point there we have this crisis in the health / disease system because it is more expensive to repair. But people will get it. And we're already seeing trends. Credit Suisse put out a recommendation, I think 18 months ago, to its people on its brokerage list, saying that if they wanted to make money over the next so many years in the food industry, you want to be buying butter stocks and saturated fat stocks. People knock Pete Evans. I'm not here to defend him. I don't agree with everything he says. But when he talks about getting rid of processed foods and eating more real foods, meat, vegetables, fruits, these sorts of foods, that these are the sort of things that the body probably runs best on, a bit like the Ferrari probably runs better on the 98 than the diesel, he has a point. And the dietitians come out and attack him, and public health come out and attack him because he's not following the nutritional guidelines. South Park did an episode, and the nutritional guidelines we have here are similar to America, and they basically said, well, what's the problems with these guidelines and how can we fix them? And I don't know, it was Cartman or one of those basically said, why don't we just turn it upside down? And that's probably about where we need to get to. So the problem that we have in saying that the sugar tax is the answer is that we have, first of all, overstated the problem. And number two, we've completely misdiagnosed the causes. If we'd have left people alone in the 70s just to continue eating what their grandparents ate and what for generations people have eaten without being told what to do, we probably wouldn't have nearly 3/4 of the mess that we've now created. So what's public health solution? 10 years ago, they wanted a fat tax. They very quietly moved away from that and they're now wanting a sugar tax. Because you know what? A fat tax was wrong and a sugar tax is wrong. Giving people information. I don't want to... the manufacturer, if you have a car, I'll say, put this as the fuel to put into it. But you know what? If you don't, it's going to be your problem. You'll suffer the consequences. People ask me, what's a good thing to be eating? I'm happy to say, look, this is the sort of foods that I would suggest that you eat. But at the end of the day, you've got to decide what you feed yourself. But generally speaking, if you give people the right information, the majority of people say, I'd actually prefer to be healthy rather than sick. I'd actually prefer to have some energy, to have some get up and go, to feel a little bit better. Not everybody, but most. And if you provide them with useful information and you don't wag your fingers at them and we stop hectoring people, but above all else, we actually be honest about what the root causes of the problems we face are, then we're not going to need to tax things. And furthermore, in the future, we're probably going to have less demands on the health system. Thanks, and as Janessa said, I'm also happy to chat afterwards or over lunch.